I'm Megan Heitman. I will be the host for today. So back up to the amazing team that is doing the presentation. If you were able to see the welcome yesterday, this particular team got some big props from me on the work that they've done on this toolkit and the amazing kind of just setup that they've been able to accomplish. So the fantastic team from Rutgers in New Jersey of Janice Mcdonald, Sage Lichtenwalner, and Liesl Hotaling will be doing our presentation today.
Great. Thank you, Megan. Welcome, everybody. So glad I see some familiar faces. My name's Janice Mcdonald. I'm at Rutgers University, and I've had the pleasure of working with the ARIS team now for a number of years. Our presentation today is going to walk you through some of the basics of our new Broader Impacts Toolkit that we've been working on for a number of years now. So I just want to pause for a moment and let my collaborators introduce themselves, who've been playing a major role in helping us pull this together. So Saj, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hello, I'm Lichtenwalner. I've been at Rutgers now for a long time, working with Janice on a number of outreach projects, and it's been fun to work on building basically the technical components of the toolkit, working with Janice and Liesl.
And Liesl.
Hi, I'm Liesl. I'm not technically at Rutgers, but I've been working with everyone at Rutgers for way too long now, over 2 decades. And I am also based in New Jersey. And as Saj was mentioning, just working on the toolkit from its inception with the Centers for Ocean Science Excellence Education Days and all of its iterations into its present form.
Great, thank you. Okay, and I see Susan, our fearless leader, is here. She's also a big part of this toolkit development. I think everyone knows Susan. Susan, you want to say hi to everybody?
Hi, everybody. I'm Susan Reno, Executive Director of ARIS.
And of course, Megan. The other person who's not here, I think he's hosting another session, is Jory Weintraub, who has also been part of the training team and has been helping us work on the toolkit. And then finally, I see Dr. Ellen Iverson is here, who's been a big part of the evaluation component of the toolkit and the work with the toolkit. So, so let's get going. I just kind of wanted to start. I know most of you are super familiar with ARIS, but I kind of want to look at what ARIS does through the lens of the toolkit a little bit, and just remind everybody that a big part of what ARIS does is identifying, curating materials that can help us build a better, broader impacts community, right? So a lot of the work that ARIS does is around this idea of building resources. And what we really want to do is expand the engagement that we have in development of high quality BI activities, really developing that community of practice that we all feel so strongly about within the ARIS community as we found our people, right? I hear many of us say that, and these resources are really reflective of that. And I noticed Dr. Nathan Meyer is here. We have a group of people who are really helping us refine this toolkit and test it in a much more rigorous way. We have and we'll talk more about that a little bit later, but really, developing those human resources that are needed to really utilize these tools effectively. And then, of course, as we've said, really promoting that cross-institutional collaboration, all of us working together to kind of create the best kind of resources possible to help one another build the field and build our capacity. So just wanted to mention that. So what our goals for today are really to kind of walk you through some of the tools. But before we get started, Liesl kind of alluded that we have some background in this from previous NSF funded projects, one of them being the Broader Impact Wizard. So I'm curious to know if you guys want to log into Menti. I'm going to drop out of this and get onto my Menti slide here. But I'm curious to know how many of you have utilized the wizard before. Let me just pull up this screen and bear with me for a minute. Testing all my technological capabilities here. There we go. Can you guys see that now? Liesl, we're good? Okay, good. Yeah, obviously it's working. Okay, so some of you have used, a couple of you have not used the wizard before, so that's good to know. Wait another second to see how many have, how many haven't. Okay, got quite a few that haven't, so that's good news. We're
And
able to
Janice, I
share.
was going to say, there's a couple questions that we're going to be using Menti, so go ahead and leave this Menti screen open on your
Yeah,
other
good
browser.
idea. Okay, looks like the vast majority of us have not used it before, which is good to know. I'm glad to get that feedback from you. Okay, one more minute and we'll close this out. Anybody else? Last call? Okay. All right, good. So it looks like a lot of us have not used it before, which is, again, good information for us as we give you this tour. We'll get into this now. Okay, so to kind of give you the broadest overview of what this toolkit's all about, first of all, you can find it at the URL at the bottom. I think either Saj or Liesl can drop the link in for you right now, so you don't have to type all that in. But basically, ARIS has been working on a set of tools that do kind of three important things. One is that it would help researchers learn about broader impacts in general. And a lot of that content is centered around the BI wizard and the guiding principles document. There's a lot of tools around writing broader impact plans, which you can find again in the wizard and also our checklist. And then the third kind of purpose we have is around reviewing proposals. And that's our rubric, and the newest thing we have is our tutorial. So kind of three buckets, if you will, of reasons to use the tools. And most of the tools, actually all of the tools, really use the researcher voice. So they're geared for researchers. It speaks to them, at least we hope it does, and we'd like your feedback on that, as a mechanism to help them do these three different tasks. So what we'll do now, and feel free to drop questions in the chat as we go, try to make this as useful as possible and answer your questions as we go. I'll also note that there is a guiding document in the portal, in the Summit portal, that we put together that's kind of in an FAQ style of the common kind of questions that you get from researchers, or at least that we get from researchers, that will help you utilize the tools to answer common requests from researchers. So I invite you to check that out as we go. But as we go through this, so we'll focus a little bit on how to use the tools, and again, using this FAQ style engagement here, we're going to start with learning about broader impacts. And this list here is common questions that we've kind of tried to address through the tools. And what we can do is sort of walk through some of these and help you kind of figure out how to best utilize them with researchers to help answer their questions. So again, this part of the website, you'll see this little fire meteor thing here is where you can find all of these questions, and then in turn links to where that information shows up in the toolkit. And so one good example is the guiding principles are there in that section that again helps them think about learning about broader impacts. This is probably the best place to start if you're learning about broader impacts, is the guiding principles document. And what it really does is it provides a really nice overview on the 5 questions that BI plans should address. And then it goes ahead and breaks down each of these 5 criteria that NSF reviewers are instructed to use on the BI part of the proposal. And it also includes some questions and general principles that you should consider when developing a plan. So this is just a PDF document, very user-friendly, very easy to kind of begin your journey in looking at the tools as a broadest thing. And I imagine many of you that are familiar with ARIS have probably seen the guiding principles before, but if you haven't, I definitely invite you to start with that. It's a great tool to start to learn about broader impacts. It's also very portable. You can print it and utilize it in consultations or send it via email to your researchers as as they're trying to learn about what broader impacts are in the most general sense. So that's a great place to start. So again, lots of information around learning about BI. What we're going to do now is I'm going to turn this over to Saj, and he's going to talk a little bit about the writing of BI plans and how we would utilize the BI wizard for that. So Saj, would you like to take over? I know you want to do more of a live demo, which I think is
Sure, yes. I'm
good
going to
idea.
switch over to the site itself. So, Janice said there's a lot of information, obviously, about finding broader impacts, what they are and how to do that. And then sort of the next phase is, well, now that we know what they are, like, how do we actually write them and assemble them? And that's really where sort of the meat of this, that's what this website is really designed to support, is that sort of, if you're a practitioner working with a researcher, basically helping them along, mentoring them in this process, this site is sort of a go-between between you and help with those discussions. If you haven't been to this site, if you have been to this site before, you should note that there's these two new options here on the bottom, which we just added in the last few weeks. Actually, this tutorial, which Liesl will get to later, was just added yesterday. So this toolkit has been ever evolving over the years, and so we encourage you to let us know what you think as you go through the site and work with others on the site. But step one is, as Janice mentioned, the guiding principles document. And as you're trying to figure out how to assemble, a good broader impact project and developing that into a plan to put in your proposal. And then we also have this checklist, which is basically much of the guiding principles document sort of in a checklist form. And so it's all here online. It's pretty simple, straightforward. One of the things I would point out, though, is that this checklist actually saves your data. So if you, happen to be filling out, this checklist and come back, again, as long as you're on the same computer, a day or two later, if you go to another website and come back, your data should all be saved. And so that's one of the features of this site, is that it does allow you to sort of keep your information all locally to your machine. It's not being sent to our server at all. So this is all just on your local web browser. So if you switch to a different web browser, it won't be there either. But if you do work on this over a course of a couple of days, that's the way this website is built. Basically very simple, no logins, but it will save from session to session. And so that's what you can do as you work through your project and make sure that you have all the pieces. This checklist is there basically to help remind you, what are the most important pieces that you should make sure that you include in your plan, including the potential benefit to society, the extent of your activities align, and then are they well reasoned and well organized, and how qualified is your team and your institution to actually accomplish the project. So it's a nice little just a cheat sheet basically to help you make sure you've got all the pieces. The more significant, sort of the biggest part of the site, which is actually the sort of longest part, is what we affectionately call the Broader Impact Wizard. And as Liesl mentioned, this sort of started with the COSE, the Center for Ocean Science Education Excellence, almost 10 years ago. We put this BI wizard together to help people, assemble these projects. And at the time, it was more wizard-like in that we would have you select an option, and it would help you narrow the various kinds of activities. We had a database of activities, and so you could kind of choose based on your budget and your audience which kind of activity you want. But that ended up being a little bit more complicated to support over time. And as originally we built it for the ocean sciences community, but as we tried to make this more general for not all of NSF, all the kinds of research that NSF supports, and even beyond NSF, we kind of took away some of those wizardy elements. So now the wizard is more like an online interactive notebook or workbook where it has some questions, and as you go through, you can write in some of your thoughts and then get those results at the end. But because we haven't been able to come up with a better name, we still call it the Broader Impact Wizard, and so that's the name that we have now. So there's two key parts to the wizard, and they're actually up here in the main menu. And that's what we call sort of the plan elements, which are basically what are the elements of a good broader impact project. And then there's the second part, which is the wizard proper, which is basically here are the steps that you need to go through to make sure that you have an effective plan. And the notes that you record in both of those sections will eventually appear in the summary document, which I'll get to in a second. Again, the wizard is not designed, if you're familiar with the data management plan tools that are out there where you can create multiple data management plans and copy and edit them and save a whole library of your data management plans for submitting your different proposals. This isn't built like that because at least so far, every broader impact project tends to be a little different and there's no one size fits all that we've figured out yet. And so it's a much more fluid situation. So this is really built much more as sort of a note-taking tool. And then we give you those notes at the end to go, make sure that you're on the same page with your partners and you have those notes to then write your proposal proper when you go through that. So that's just, again, how this is designed. And so let me dive into the wizard a little bit just to give you a little flavor of how it works. What we have on the homepage here, basically an introduction to the wizard, just a 2-minute quick intro to give you an idea of how the site works. And I'm going to click get started, and that's going to take me to basically the introduction page of the wizard, which is this plan elements introduction. And this basically, again, this has a more deeper overview of what are broader impacts. How do we build a broader impact project? This is a very cute video. That if you haven't seen, I encourage you to watch this out. It's a nice overview of, how do we make this happen overall. Gives you, especially for researchers, gives them a good background to this part of the NSF proposal process. And then down here we have those plan elements all described. Who will I engage? How much will it cost? How is my research relevant? And how will I know that it's successful? So those are all the key things. And the fourth thing is pulling it all together and going to the wizard proper. And I'm going to think like an actual researcher. I'm going to say, forget all the background information. Let me just go and start with pulling it all together and start writing my broader impact plan. And so then that takes you to the wizard side of the wizard. Again, sort of an introduction of what is it that a broader impact project should have. And I'm going to click get started, and that's going to take me to this step 1, which is sort of what do you want to do? And this talks about the first step is making sure that your goals of your research align with your broader impact project. And for those of you who are familiar with backwards design, this is basically that. This is sort of taking a researcher from where they are, what is their goal, their message they want to get across, start with that, and then make sure the rest of your plan jives with your ultimate goals. And so that's where we kind of sort of dive in with the background information and then step back out, in this backwards design process as you're coming together, figuring out the final pieces. But let me show you a little bit about how this site is cross-linked to each other. So say I get to this page because I wanted to dive right in and figure out how to write my plan, but I don't really understand what is it that my takeaway message of my broader impact plan should be. How do I fill in these boxes? Well, you skip the whole page about that we have that talks about how your research is relevant to society. So if I'm going to click back on that, and here we have a whole lot of information with some that would help you answer that question, including NSF's broader impact priority areas, which many of us are familiar with. They're all examples are given here, and additional information about your proposal. And then we here have some deeper questions that really help you think about your project. To figure out, well, what is it that I'm doing that really would be relevant to an audience that I want to reach out to? And so I'm going to go ahead and think of myself as a researcher who studies penguins in Antarctica and is looking about how climate change is impacting those penguins. And so that might be something like my key science question is, how are the penguin diets are affected by waters as they warm as a result of climate change? What elements, scientific questions do I want to highlight in my broader impact work? Well, perhaps I want to highlight food webs because food webs are something that a lot of people should know about and understand and care about. I'm just going to enter that here. Just some quick notes for some demonstration here. Why does this information matter to my audience? Well, if we understand food webs, it helps us explore our place in the ecosystem. And then if I scroll down, what are the potential benefits to sharing this information for the audience? Well, I'm just going to quickly earlier, off the cuff say, hey, greater awareness of climate change impacts is important for many people to be more aware of. And so there, I filled in these boxes. There's more information on this page about broader impact identity. So a whole lot about relevance. Again, there's really a lot of information. This is almost a textbook, as this part of the wizard to give people a lot more background information. And I filled that in, and then I'm going to click back to step 1 up here in the menu. And when I did that, you notice actually the relevance box has now been checked off because I filled in all the circles on that. And now that I've come back to step 1, I actually have my notes from before are actually being shown to me. So when I really try to figure out what my takeaway message should be, I have my previous work that I worked on and other elements of the wizard are all there. So this is all cross-linked throughout. So I'm going to go in and say, hey, you know what? The takeaway message of my my impact here is penguin populations are changing in Antarctica due to climate change. And then I'm going to say, if I come up with my science is relevant to this audience, I look at what I filled in before and I enter the text in and I add in the relevance into. And so then, I can click through and, there's all this, the steps are here. And I'm just going to click through the end, basically. So I'm going to just skip through this now here. And eventually you're going to get to the summary page. And the summary page, again, is not, going to be a perfect paragraph to copy and paste in your proposal. It's going to be basically all of your notes from what you filled out before. And if you haven't filled out the various sections, there are links there on the summary page to help you go back to those sections to make sure that you've answered all the questions. And again, this is something that a researcher can hopefully do on their own, or you working with a researcher can go through these elements to basically make sure that you have all the pieces that you want to include. One last thing I will mention that is a key feature that we put a lot of work into that we know a lot of people like is that on the audience page, we have here a number of different audiences that are, a lot of projects tend to work with. But we have a lot of information about those various audiences. But if you choose one of these audiences, and in this case, say I was working with K-12 age children, and then I go back to the summary page, there's actually a link then. Fill in this part. Yeah, I have to fill in a little bit more information. There's a link then that actually will link to what we call a literature connection, basically a whole bunch of papers that we've scoured for each audience that talks about various broader impact projects for each of those audiences. And those are actually linked up here in the menu as well under literature connections. But a big resource that a lot of people find useful. To help them actually cite, that you can actually add citations, when you're actually assembling your broader impact plan and the project. And so that's a common thing. And so, that's basically it for the wizard. Again, it's designed to be sort of generic. It's not discipline specific. It's not designed to give you everything that you need to plan a broader impact project, because so much of that depends on the partners and the activities that you choose. But it is designed to give you all those, all the key elements that at least we've identified over the years that help make a plan effective. And so we're always looking for feedback on the layout and content, and we're happy to meet with people to discuss more about that as we continue to evolve this toolkit over time. And so that is sort of the middle piece of this nugget about how you develop a plan. And I'll turn it over, I think, to Liesl now to figure out how did you do it.
Thank you, Saj. That was great. Maybe we should pause here for any questions before we get too far, because that was a lot of information at once. And I'm not sure if people were clicking around independently or following what Saj was covering. Does he? Let's see. Sorry, I can't see that small.
Yeah, no, I was like trying to look down.
I know I'm peering my face closer to the camera, right?
We've got a couple of questions. Let's do the one in the chat first.
Raised.
Yeah.
Yes. Kyle, why don't you go ahead? I see your hand raised first on my side.
Great, thank you. Well, first I got to say it is really apparent how much work and thought has gone into this, and I am really blown away by how valuable this is going to be for my own work. Even if faculty, I don't guide them through every step, it's a framework in which I can kind of give them bullet points. So kudos to you. This is going to be very valuable. So I work with a lot of faculty writing career proposals. And so this requires, a holistic approach. It's kind of also, the classic NSF ambiguous terminology about integrating your whole education plan and broader impacts. And these are junior faculty who are learning this whole process. So I think this will be valuable, but the question is there a career specific section or information on how to do this holistic integration?
Who wants to tackle that first? Liesl, you want to
Yeah,
take the run
this
at it?
has come up a couple times, and we've discussed potentially doing. We don't have that right now. But we have discussed that as well to make it a bit more, because that is such a, writing a career is such an onerous task, and the integration and the weight of the BI in a career proposal evaluation is so much heavier than any other research proposals that they'll face in their lives. So we do want to make young investigators, or early career investigators, make them very aware of that different structure and the weighting value of their BI, and understand that it's so important to work with professionals, because when you look at the dollar value that they sometimes assign to the BI component of their career proposals, it is clear that they have beautiful hearts and want to do amazing things, but have absolutely no idea how much it costs to do those things. So that's a huge portion of it too. We used to have a part of the old BI wizard is we actually had several tasks that were delineated with approximate price points. Some of the price point ranges were very, very wide, some were narrower. That was a bit hard to keep up with, but we do have a, what we call it, it was kind of swiped from Price is Right, but it's a high-low game, and people can use that, and that's built into the wizard too, and that will help really early career professionals give a good think about how much things actually cost to do. So I know that was a really long-winded answer, but yes, we will get there, and we are thinking about that.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
And Kyle, I just dropped in the chat the specific page on the higher lower. Often, and also that page that Saj briefly shows on BI identity is also an element of what you're asking for, is getting them to sort of look at the career trajectory is really what career proposals are all about, right? Not having it be a one-off, and thinking about it as a career-long trajectory as opposed to this one proposal, and it takes time. But I encourage you to look at the plan elements section that Shah showed you, because that's a lot of the background training and way of thinking that Liesl was talking about, I think.
Yeah,
That
and
will
that
really
it's just that identity piece, and really grabbing them early to understand that their BI pathway should also follow their scientific achievement pathway to really have a broader impact at the end, and not just the one-offs, as Janice said.
If we have Jacqueline next,
Jacqueline
and then our chat question.
Yep.
Hi, thank you. So I am Dr. Jacqueline Goldstein. I'm currently an ARIS fellow working with the wizard to include more inclusive and equitable supplements to it. And I spent a lot of time going into the nitty-gritty of it. And there was one thing that I found confusing, and I wanted to share that here in case other people run into the same thing. And it's tiny and logistical, but it just took me a while to get to figure it out, which is that when you click on plan elements, it has the first few steps, the plan elements, and then it has the wizard. The whole thing is titled wizard. And it took me a significant time to be what's the difference between plan elements and wizard, because they're two different menus, but then they're all in the same ribbon. And why is there something that's called this thing in plan elements, it's also called this thing in the wizard. So that in and of itself, I just spent some time spinning my wheels, and wanted to bring that up in case anyone also wonders that same question. Once I figured that out, it's quite clear, and it's very well laid out, and how it funnels from the elements and the educational portion to the wizard was very clear. But it was just that step 0. So just wanted to put that out there as my experience as I was really trying to chew on it.
Thanks for that. Appreciate it.
Yes, and apologies, but a year ago the wizard was the wizard, but now we have this checklist and the rubric, which we haven't even gotten to yet. So there's and then the wizard has gotten so big because there's just so many elements, and coming in with a good broader impact. And as Janice was saying, there's a lot more focus on identity. What is your BI identity? And so, and of course, this is things it's hard to give all that information to a researcher, on the first discussion. And so, as we've collected more information, we're it's still evolving. So apologies for the confusion, but any recommendations for, again, as we try, there's a whole lot of information there. We want to make this, accessible for you and for the researchers we all work with. And that's a challenge as we try to add even more information to the pot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jacqueline, feel free to email us suggestions. We are more than open to tweaking it. I'm sort of laughing to myself because last week we had our ARIS leadership meeting, and I'm known for wanting everything to be as perfect as possible. I'll just leave it at that. So I'm happy to take your suggestions, and like Saj said, it's an evolving piece. So we're happy to work with you to clarify that.
Thank
I
you.
think we've got another question in here. How long does the usual user spend using the wizard? More broadly, how long should a PI spend on the BI part of the proposal? Ooh, Dean, that's a really good question.
Spectrum.
Yeah, it really is a spectrum. I'm not sure how to answer you succinctly. And it really does vary. I can tell you this, that video that Saj started with, the 4-minute introduction to BI, is one that's probably the most utilized part of the site, Dean. So that's 4 minutes. So that's the sort of the least amount of time that I know people spend on it. And then, of course, everything in between, right? I think to go through it, as Saj said, it really is becoming a textbook at this point. And to do all the games and the videos and everything does take a significant amount of time. But if you come to our presentation, this is a shameless plug, later this afternoon, we have our certification discussion. And we've actually put some thought into, for BI professionals, how to utilize these tools. I see, like I said, Nathan's here. There's a bunch of us working on, how do we chunk this stuff out into kind of a more of a bite-sized approach, right? To help researchers walk through this in a systematic way. So more to come on that, Dean.
And I also think it
Okay.
ranges how green the user is. If they've never even heard of BI and they're going at this, their first proposal, there's a lot to consume there. So it will take some time. If you then understand how these pieces are put together, the wizard still serves as a really nice infrastructure to remind you of certain points as you're pulling it together, but going through the wizard will be a much quicker process.
You understand, I know what I think the answers to all these questions are, but these are questions that I get asked mostly by, the new investigators. And, I've got career on the brain right now for reasons you all understand. But, when people are thinking about writing a grant to NSF, as opposed to, some foundation grant that's, only 3 pages or 5 pages long instead of 15 plus all the other stuff, they really want to know what the investment looks like up front. And I'm just curious, what other people tell them.
Yeah, so fair enough. I mean, I think the initial run through of just clicking around, I would give it a 30 minutes. Would that be fair, Janice?
Yeah, I think as a first run, run at building their knowledge, absolutely. That's probably enough and the baseline. Having said that, Ellen and her colleague Kristen are going to be doing usability testing, where we'll be able to answer that better in the future. But yeah, that's probably a good guess, Liesl, based on our experiences here.
But it's
Yeah,
like
please.
anything else, like, if you work through it and think through it, it's going to take, a couple hours. And Jacqueline raised a good point that, there's the time that you think about it and the time that you write it up, and then there's the partnership building. The partnership building can take days and weeks,
Years.
and that's on the BI side. It's also on the intellectual merit side. If you have a good partner you've worked with before, that part's easy. But if you're establishing a new relationship, then that alone is going to take a long time. So.
Thank you. And whatever your UX testing tells you about time, please post that.
We will, for sure. All right, Liesl, should we move on to the rubric? I don't want to run out of time, and I'll just give people a taste of what that's all about.
Absolutely. Sorry, I was still reading through all the questions. I will share my screen. Okay. I guess like hands up, we can do that. We can poll everybody. Has anybody used a rubric before in evaluating a document? Anybody a K-12 teacher before using rubrics?
Yeah, Jean is. Jacqueline, Laura, I've got a couple.
Okay, so a couple of you are familiar with rubrics. What I need to say right up front is the blessing and a curse of a rubric is that there is subjectivity. The idea of a rubric is to eliminate a goodly amount of subjectivity, but at the end of the day, it remains in there. And you can't have the idea of a rubric is to make it as succinct as possible. But it does open itself up to wordier discussions about what is trying to be evaluated. So with that all in mind, we have this tool embedded in the toolbox, embedded in the wizard, which is a broader impact plan rubric. There are 4 different questions, as Saj was saying. You can type all this in, and cookies will keep the information in there for a while. Just don't clear your cookies as you're writing your proposal and lose it all, right? So your broader impacts wizard, there are, as I said, there's 5 different questions, and they're broken down, and the terminology is very consistent with what you would see in an NSF review. So the first question, what is the potential for this proposed activity to benefit society or advance desired societal outcomes? So you can click on this link if you're not familiar with what the 10 investment areas are, but then it's broken down into audience characteristics. So who is your target audience and what are the characteristics? And is your proposal addressing with the needs of your target audience? And then audience engagement, what are the mechanisms that are using? Sometimes that could be a mismatch where what you're proposing is beautiful, but it's really meant for working with policymakers, and you claim that you're working with K-12 audience. Those two will not match, right? And then audience alignment. So the plan ensures and needs the interests of the audience can be met. So you can see that there are descriptors of each excellent, very good, good, fair, poor. Then if you move on, question 2, to what extent do the proposed activities suggest and explore creative, original, potentially transformative concepts? I can't remember who mentioned the NSF speak before, but that is the hang up word here, transformative, right? And we're trying to break that down as much as we possibly can here. So we've broken that down into 3 areas. If it's research-based, the proposal draws upon prior experiences and knowledge, and the relevant literature is cited. Evidence-based, the proposal leverages existing effective practices for working with your partners. And then innovation. The proposal provides an original and creative BI plan that that meets the partner's needs, and then also adequately reflects the research that is being done in the work. Those are 3 different areas, and it is clear up front that the BI plan should address at least one of these areas. We do not expect a proposal to address all 3 of those areas because that would be incredibly difficult. If it does, that's fantastic. Extra brownie points for everyone involved, but it is really hard to reach that transformative component of this when we know that the scientist is proposing research, scientific research normally, and the BI is something slightly different. So we don't expect the physicist to also be an expert in policy to be transformative. The next question is the plan for carrying out the proposed activities. Is it well reasoned? Is it well organized? Is it based on sound rationale? And does the plan incorporate a mechanism to access success? So again, the 10 investment areas right there, and then the project objectives. And as Saj was clicking through the wizard, we have the SMART goals and objectives criteria in there so that they're supported in trying to generate SMART objectives. And then the links to NSF target outcomes, so making sure that it's aligning to what SF would like to see. And then evaluation. The proposal describes a plan to measure the project outcomes. Now, the evaluation can also range in scope, and sometimes it just involves, depending on what the activity is, sometimes it could be fairly easy, fairly a low cost evaluation. Others involve a very broad scope to achieve your goals. And there's a lot of money and time and attention needed. So that is a very wide spectrum there. So again, getting back to using Rubric, there is some subjectivity involved. Question 4, how well qualified is the team? So we want to make sure that the team that's being cited, and we stress the word team, to make sure that investigators know that it really does take a team to build one of these programs to be successful. So the team, you have all the information listed in the proposal. The partnership, you understand how the partnership will be coming together. You're not just randomly listing someone in the proposal. Partnership needs, the information is clear that the roles, like if this is awarded, you know who's going to be doing what within that team, and then a timeline. So we understand basically through the entire proposal how and when the activities will occur. And then the 5th question, are there adequate resources available to the PI, either at the home institution or through collaborators to carry out the proposed activities? So is the infrastructure there, and is the budget clearly defined, that you understand where the money's going and people will be clearly supported? So those are the 5 areas. As you can see, it is a bit lengthy, but this is a really good way to assess a draft and so from the proposal preparation component, you can have some outside eyes compare the proposal, the draft proposal, to the rubric to see where there might be holes, or oh, I'm not quite getting this, or even just a little bit, since you're space constrained, see section here and not have to reiterate something in a proposal when you are trying to just hit those 15 pages normally. So because this seems a bit overwhelming, we also have created something in the rubric to support the rubric, which is a rubric. I should pause and ask if there's any questions about the rubric before we go into the tutorial.
Liesl, you also might want to show them the summary page, because as you click on your responses, it will give you a summary at the end. So many people don't realize it can do that. So if you highlight some of the boxes.
Next. You're absolutely right. Sorry.
So it'll give you a score. Yeah,
it will give you all your scores. Sorry, Janice, I didn't hit that on the very end. So you can click clear and restart. I'll do that, and I'll click a couple of these so you can see them at the end. So you can see how this would align. Are the target outcomes identified? So these are the target audiences that we want that NSF prefers for people to work with those audiences. They are fairly loose, and if you give a good example and you have a strong partnership, they usually will fit under these bins, but you are open to other ideas. And then under question 3, sorry, everybody's lovely faces are in my way as I'm trying to hit the back button here. It's not working, sorry. Let me start from the beginning here. No matter where I'm going on this page, everybody's faces keep showing up on my screen. I have to keep moving everybody out of the way, sorry. It's taking a moment here. So is the plan for carrying out the proposed activities, and this is again the investment area alignment. So I'm not sure if Sean, if that was what you were asking in question 3. If not, I can answer it. Okay. Were there any other? I'm seeing I think everything else.
We have one question from Kyle.
Sorry.
No worries. That's what we're here for.
Okay, so the evaluation plan for these things is oftentimes, as we know, kind of tacked on at the end. And if you use backward design about how you want to what outcomes do you want, how are you going to measure them? Oftentimes an external evaluator would be fantastic and great, but when they see the price tag, they immediately, no way, back off
Mhm.
on that.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, there's that. And one example would be, I mean, an example of if you want this outcome, because a lot of these programs, you have examples of them. If you want this outcome, here's an instrument for a proven instrument for measuring that, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel and they can draw on that. So sort of these boilerplate evaluation plans that are simple and based on best practices, you know, when they check that box, that would be fantastic. When they check the innovation box, another thing that comes up is, do I need IRB approval for these things? You know, if you're developing this really innovative education tool and you want to really measure it and do research on it, sometimes you need IRB approval. And that's another thing where they'll balk. So just having something on there, maybe an FAQ, I don't know, just that's a suggestion.
Yeah, I love that little flag, like an IRB flag that pops up, because we all need to deal with that. I like that. Megan?
Yeah, I'm gonna actually try and help answer the evaluation question. I put a link in the chat to a resource that was developed by CU Boulder. They wrote a chapter that will be coming out in our Broader Impacts book, but their project was to, as they were writing it, they basically saw that there were typical instruments being used for typical audiences. And so they created this tool that's interactive, so you can search like some really nice evaluation tools that you can use when working with specific audiences. So, I mean, maybe we should be able to link to that within the wizard as a resource, but that resource is very well built and very useful already.
Great, thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of, thank you, Megan, that's really helpful. There are a few others like the iTest network and AZEL network. A lot of them have these banks, these resources for all these ideas. So absolutely for evaluation. So that's a great suggestion. We can think about how, yeah, in case for AZEL, exactly. Yes, that's great. Thank you. Great idea. Did I get all the questions so far? Okay. So because that is rather a lot, what we wanted to try to do, geez, I'm telling you, everywhere I need to go, everyone's faces are there. Okay, so because that was a lot, what we decided to do was create a tutorial as to how to possibly apply the rubric. So we have a broader impact case study, and it seems really big, but what we did, because you can't really answer all the questions in the rubric without the entire proposal in front of you. So we couldn't just simply put a few paragraph BI plan in this for a reviewer to properly assess if you understood who the team was, how is that all going to come together, what's the budget look like. You can't answer those without all this information. So I realize this looks a little lengthy, but it does have all the information needed. So it has the BI plan, it has the budget information, and it has the facilities, the equipment all listed. So then if you go ahead and click the rubric evaluation, you'll notice that these questions are here that pop up underneath it. So what's the potential for the proposed activity to benefit society? So remember, that's the question that we saw in the actual rubric right there. And then you can go ahead and basically grade what you read above. So you're going through this and I'm going to say it was very good. So I thought it was very good. And what we've gone ahead and done is basically we've taken a stab at evaluating that BI project. And this is how we would evaluate this. Now, that's not to say that we are right. And if you don't get the exact, if you thought it was very good and not excellent, well, here's the reason. Here's the rationale as to why we thought it was excellent. And then there's a case study example that you can go to that information. And then it also links out, as Saj was saying before, we tried to make this as interlinked and webbed as possible. So here's the resource where you can visit to learn more about determining partner projects and target audiences. Now, I mean, that's the age-old debate during a panel review if something is excellent versus very good, going back and forth. We would get that. Where I think any sort of flags would be raised if we've said it's excellent and you're going through it and you would rate it 4. Now that's just really out of whack and something's kind of wrong here. So if we go ahead and just keep going, you'll see as you work through this tutorial, it's the same thing. We said on this one, it was very good. I just clicked good. And here's the explanation as to why we thought it was very good and not excellent. And then the toolkit resources. And then it brings you back into the proposal or the information from the example proposal as to where the information was. Does that make sense to everybody? This is all brand new. This seems like, I know it seems like it can be a little overwhelming, but I think it really does do a good idea of walking newer people through this proposal, through the evaluation components of this, and then how to improve the writing if they need to. So I'll just stop there. I know that's a lot, and answer any questions that might come up. What is a strong evaluation plan like now? Okay, yes, yes.
Yeah, I would just comment on Laura's thing.
That's what I'm reading right now.
We developed this tutorial to basically help you apply the rubric to an actual case study example. It's even better if you were sitting around a table of people and doing a group discussion and you could have those conversations, but at least this is a first attempt to do that offline as well.
Exactly. And if you're doing a large group training, you could have people do this independently and have their results and then come together as a group, either if it's asynchronous online training, or if you're spread around in a group, or have this as homework where people do it and then come back and have that discussion as well. There's a lot of different ways this could be. I mean, we've done it with paper-based, as Saj mentioned before, in other workshops, but this whole past few years has changed our minds as to how all training can be done. So we went ahead and created this attempt.
I'll just add that it's meant to start the conversation, right? I mean, it helping us kind of benchmark what excellent looks like amongst us as BI professionals and amongst researchers, as a whole, I think is what this is all about. It's not whether I rated it very good and you excellent. It's about the conversation that ensues from that. So I think that's the main point to take away from that, to help bring us all together and develop our skills together.
Any other questions? Hopefully that wasn't too overwhelming. We hope it's helpful and not hurtful to work through that.
And also keep in mind, there is that FAQ in the workshop summit portal. So I encourage you to check that out and take a look at that as to help clarify. It's got screenshots and everything in it to help refresh your memory on everything we've covered today, because we know it's kind of a whirlwind. Last thing we have to cover, if there's no other questions, is inviting you to be part of this process. So let me just share with you really quickly an invitation to join us. Let's see, hopefully that's working. So we're fortunate, Susan and Saj and Liesl and I are the recipient of a grant from NSF to explore and research this toolkit a little bit more systematically. So we're looking for partners. We currently have 3 partners, Penn State, University of Nebraska, Lincoln, and University of Texas, Dallas are all collaborating with us to research this toolkit a little bit further. We also have, really looking at how people facilitate this and what it looks like. Our goal is to produce a journal. We're going to work with the Journal of Community Engagement and Scholarship as a special issue to work with our 10 pilot testers and of course with our wonderful evaluation team at CERC, to put together some case studies that will publish this in this journal and kind of serve as a collaborative record of how these tools can be used amongst BI professionals and to improve the broader impacts for researchers. So we have an application out. You can certainly see the University of Missouri website for more details. I'll put that link in the chat. Where our applications are being accepted through May 24th. We'll announce our selection sometime in June. We'll work with you for approximately 12 to 18 months. It involves a $25K award, sub-award. And you'll participate in the research working with Ellen and our team. And you'll help us write the journal articles, of course, in a nice publication. We'll provide additional training like you got today, and certainly conversation on how best to use these tools. You'll get some awesome evaluation tools from CERC that will help you document your responses and how your researchers respond to this. And then, you know, you'll go ahead and if you're interested in applying, again, you can go to that Mizzou site. You'll upload a PDF document with answers to these questions. If you're really, it's sort of a basic approach. We want to know a little bit about you, how you think you might use this at your institution, your experience in working with broader impacts, resources they've used to develop BI projects, and why you want to be part of this. So that's a very simple application, again, being accepted through May 24th. And basically, you know, that opportunity is there for you to, you know, help us to get on our team and help us pursue these tools a little bit further and clarify their usage amongst researchers at different places around the country. So we're looking at a diversity of institutions participating. So if you are interested in that, please feel free to email one of us, or I think Jean put the link in there. Thank you, Jean, for where you can access that application website. So with 3 minutes to spare, Megan, I didn't go over. Is there any other questions we can answer for you today? I really appreciate all of you attending today and joining us, walking through this. I hope that, you know, Nathan, if you want to add anything about the toolkit, your experiences with it, you know, from the research point of view, feel free to jump in. But yeah, we're really excited about this and look forward to working with you all.